Cooperative games aren't usually my thing because they rely on needing either multiple people willing to pick it up to play together through local co-op, or because online co-op never works or is never implemented. And of course, most people that I do know either do not want to play video games with others or prefer something entirely different when it comes to the genre in question. Personally, I lean towards solo experiences, but I found myself drawn to Whisper Mountain Outbreak as it tries to stand out by being all about cooperative puzzles on top of the gameplay. Even though it is still unfinished in early access and facing community pressure for more content, it manages to do something interesting enough to grab my attention for the very short time that I played it for. The game is a survival horror where you explore rooms filled with escape-style puzzles, zombies, hordes, and the constant need of running back and forth to find keys, materials, and tools needed to survive and to complete each linear objective. The problem with this design is that nothing really felt like it changed from run to run. Sure, small things like the PlayStation password might be different, but the events and enemies all stay the same with very little variation. This makes it feel like a one-and-done experience rather than something you'd want to replay because in the current state, there isn't enough content here to warrant more than one run. The biggest issue by far is the progression, because in most games, no matter the genre, you expect a gradual build-up towards a big boss fight or a challenging final mission that feels like proper payoff. However, here it flips the idea on its head and not in a good way. Every single encounter will have you gathering materials, weapons, and supplies to prepare for the final mission, which turns out to just be survival mode. There's no escape, no puzzles, no ending, or any sense of progression that blends any form of story or prior missions into one. It's just you and possibly your friends fighting off an endless wave of zombies and elites until you eventually die. And as a result, you get nothing for your time spent playing. If you would like to play again, you need to be ready to spend hours running through the exact same maps and missions just to reach that section all over again. To make matters worse, our friend got disconnected right before the final section, and when he did rejoin, none of his progress carried over, so he had no skills, no guns, and no materials. But when he got disconnected, his inventory was full, so we couldn't even bring any of his things back to base because our inventories were just as full. This left us fighting the final mission at a severe disadvantage, which made an already repetitive ending even less enjoyable because that's all there was to it. Once again, there is no payoff when this should be its own game mode, not a possible placeholder for the future content. On that note, the developers have come out with a save system to fix this issue, but man was this frustrating to deal with in its original state. Despite those glaring issues that dragged the game down, it shows a lot of potential as a co-op experience, something that zombie and puzzle-solving fans have been waiting for, because the world feels surprisingly immersive, and the in-game voice comms are a standout feature with the proximity chat that adds a bit more to the tension as you all split up. The requirement to use walkie-talkies that take up inventory space, which is limited for communication, adds more to the strategy when a distant puzzle needs solving from multiple rooms so long as you play into the game's gimmick rather than doing voice comms through something like Discord or other means. It's the small touches like this that ground the atmosphere. Take the time missions for example. Playing them solo is nearly impossible, but with at least 2 other players, they become much more interesting. So the first one is 43. 47, 85.
No.
As one person combines and reads off the numbers and codes from a terminal somewhere in the compound, while the others rush around and find the clues and also to input those numbers in the right location, all before a massive horde shows up and wipes everybody out. These moments really highlight how much better the game feels when the teamwork is involved and incentivized so long as again you play into this feature. There's a part of me that feels like making it a top-down shooter makes the game a bit too easy. Still, it stands out with its unique presentation, from the tribal-sounding OST during these tense moments to the overall aesthetic. I'm not necessarily saying that it needs to be first person or third person, but the camera angles around doors, windows, and rooms make it all feel less threatening than it could have been. Less lighting and more focus on the mechanics could have made the experience stronger with pitch darkness and limited visibility, which could have added some real good suspense. The gameplay is fun and engaging, but it's like it's unsure of what it wants to be. I didn't want every stage to be just puzzle solving the same solution with my friends, as enjoyable as that was, but I also wanted more variety and replay value. because there's so much potential for tense boss fights, enemy swarms, or wave-based defenses where you run around boarding up the windows and doors to survive and push deeper into the world towards a satisfying conclusion. Instead, there are no bosses, only elite zombie variants like the Maiden who are relatively easy to take down. The game asks you to pick a playstyle at the start. You could be a medic, firefighter, and a few other roles with slightly altered starting gear and also your stats and bonuses. After this, you run through largely static locations, leveling up your crafting, melee, and shooting skills, eventually leading to a final survival mode. Along the way, if you happen to fail, usually on the time missions, it isn't a big deal because you do have multiple lives. But at the final fight, all of these lives are suddenly stripped away, completely shifting the gameplay style. It made me question why those features existed at all. The mix of these ideas never blended well, instead they clash, watering down the experience rather than enhancing it. Ultimately, the gameplay comes down to doing the exact same thing over and over until you bore yourself to death, or until the developers add more content to make it feel meaningful. What is here right now is genuinely fun, but only once. What makes the game even more interesting is that it is not overpriced. At $8, it offers at least 5 hours of basic gameplay, so you do get your money's worth out of it, and with that being said, I wouldn't recommend it in its current state unless you are keen on supporting developers who have been fairly closed off about future plans. There's no roadmap and little indication of whether community feedback will influence where the game goes next. So, if you are looking for a one and done experience that feels satisfying to play until you reach the finale, this is a fun game to play with a friend or two, if you've been itching for something a little bit different than usual.